Joe, can you ever think of something that was a prominent part of your life for many years, but now you never talk about?
I mean, I would like to do a low blow and say my father, but since my parents are still together, an active part of my life, I can't go that route.
Oh,
But it
jeez.
would have been a great joke to throw out there right away for a bombshell.
Oh,
Uh,
man. Throwing Jim
no,
under the bus here. What's going on? Good
yeah, no,
lord.
no, no. Jim's great. Like I don't know. Maybe the McDLT
Oh, you're
came
gotta
and
keep your
gone
cool
so
side.
soon.
Yeah, cool side
Cause
cool,
I
hot
cool,
side
hot
hot.
side hot. Nope, it's all
I
hot or
hear
all
you.
cold now. Yep, just gone.
Well, as much as I'd love to talk about discontinued McDonald's foods, today we're on the that part of the snake where we're coming back to TV content. And
hmm
oddly enough, we're going to be talking about another program that just happened to fizzle out right near the end. Some would say a little earlier, but
hmm
today we're talking about Game of Thrones. And this is one of those things, Joe. I remember we always talk about the theoretical whiteboard. This was one of those
hmm
shows that I don't even know if we were like afraid to tackle just because of how much was there. Was it too early to jump into it? I mean,
Yeah, like we
what
we
do you
we
think?
kind of have that niche or niche, however you prefer to pronounce the word of
Nisha?
Nietzsche, Nietzsche. it's it's a big old pessimist, but um, like we have like this zone of content if you haven't really picked up on it of like the 80s 90s and like up to 2010 at most. That's where we typically stop unless like obviously like there's some things that continued past that but they began in that range, and Game of Thrones is one where it basically started right at the end of that range that we usually go for.
Mm-hmm.
And this is also just when we talk about like pop culture phenomena, this is one that just really really can be just like really just described as phenomenon because it was something that was just so ever present in our lives for 8 seasons and then just like that gone. Like we stopped talking about it overnight after the finale, and few things have done that. And I mean, and because like obviously for anyone who's watched the show or hasn't watched the show, you may have heard like very few people liked how the show ended. Um, and while that same could be said over a lot of series, few people dropped it like a bag of hot rocks, like Game of Thrones. Like
Mm-mm.
Seinfeld ended in some mind poorly. Still talked about it forever. It's syndication, keeps going. It's eternal. But Game of Thrones, we all hated it at the end, and now it's just gone. No one talks about it anymore, except us right now.
Poof. Seriously, man,
Mm-hmm.
like the red keep just crumbled into dust, and now I feel like barely anybody is striking up conversations about it because, to your point, Joe, for many years, like literally, when you would set up a water cooler, people would somehow
Mm-hmm.
wind up over there and be like, "Hey, we want to talk about Game of Thrones." It's like,
Mm-hmm.
sure, this is a really old way of speaking, but sure, let's do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I remember people who had like absolutely no interest in this kind of subject matter were suddenly watching the show, never heard of the books, all that
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So yeah, it is incredible that this could happen so
Yeah.
fast.
I mean, like, I had those same conversations at work, and then I'd quickly have to stop them and be like, hey, you're in the eighth grade. You shouldn't be watching the show. Why are we talking
Yeah,
about this together?
you say, hey,
uh,
you're like 13. Why are you smoking
yeah.
cigarettes?
But at the
Like,
same
why am I
time,
smoking cigarettes?
it was great that there was like literally half of like my eighth and ninth graders. I made a little Daenerys strong on the board that says the bell doesn't dismiss you, I do, and they're like,
Ooh,
oh, I'm like, you get it. You shouldn't get it. I know.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what kind of sucks is that there's so much that we're going to obviously get into here, but
Mm-hmm.
this show ran from 2011 to 2019, so we're only 4 years removed. But yeah, it almost feels like we've got decades in between the end of this show, which is
Mm-hmm.
just so strange because yeah, pop culture obviously moves a lot quicker nowadays, but I've never felt it move this fast before. That's
No,
just all.
and I think it's also safe to say that I don't think anything on HBO is yet to replace it and what it did. I mean, granted, like Last of Us is huge and everyone really loves that, but like there weren't like Last of Us parties for this season after a few episodes started, and maybe that could happen as seasons go on, and who knows how big the show's going to get. But I just feel like HBO hasn't delivered something at the level of Game of Thrones in the years since it stopped airing. Not to say it
Well, I mean,
cannot be done again, but yeah,
hey, we do have El Casa del Dragon, if you remember, Joe. House of
yeah,
the Dragon
yeah.
did come out after after this ended.
Yep, and like most sequels, it does kind of fall short
I
recapturing the
did.
magic of the original.
Hey,
Mm-hmm.
whoa, whoa, whoa! Come on now, let's keep it. Don't push your politics on me, pal. But we're not here to talk about El Casa del Dragon, of course.
Mm-hmm.
We're here to talk about the show that really kicked off everything else, and frankly, kind of put fantasy on the map again.
Yeah.
And it was created by two fellas who tend to write together, David Benioff and D.B. Weiss,
Mm-hmm.
who, Joe, I'm not sure if you know this, but the quality writing and just the epic foundation that we have comes from the minds of Wolverine Origins.
I mean, if you've seen that movie, you could see how those two properties are very comparable to each other in terms of quality and entertainment. Um,
Seriously. That's what
yeah.
Benioff was known for. He helped write
Ooh.
Troy and then Wolverine Origins, and DB Weiss actually wasn't attached to Wolverine Origins, but he would actually direct several episodes of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Oh, all right
Believe
then.
it or not,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, the episode where Charlie thinks that he's actually intelligent and is part of the the college experiment where
Mm-hmm.
they convince him he's smart. Like that was all him. I thought that was pretty well done.
That was smart.
Um,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah, oh yeah, but it's obviously the child here of George R. Martin, who some of
Mm-hmm.
us are concerned will pass away long before he finishes his series.
Yes. I mean, I think it was a concern that while the show was going, that he would leave us before he could finish the series. And again, like another person who's not a fan of how his series ended on screen, didn't he vow to like finish the books in like record time to make sure that they got the ending they deserved? And we still don't have them as of this recording.
Yeah, he probably ran into a flight of stairs and just got sidetracked. I mean, it is what it
Yeah.
is.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
that or a nice French silk pie, and I cannot blame him on that. That's my weakness
Ooh.
too. Every single time my parents have to drive me to a Denny's that I don't want to go to, and that just eyes me up from behind the little display case. I'm like, yeah, looks like I gotta do a drink and a slice of pie for dinner tonight. No other food, just that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's not a hot summer night until you put a slice of American cheese on an apple pie,
Oh,
which so,
oof.
sounds horrific, doesn't it?
I mean, and also like the most American thing ever at the same time. It's really bizarre.
I got to say the story of George R. Martin is interesting to me because he kind of comes out of nowhere. A lot of people
Mhm.
don't really know who this guy is. The bearded aging man who revived the newsy hat and made it popular again. But his series of books, based on a Song of Fire and Ice, or I should say,
Mhm.
the series is a Song of Fire and Ice, and then we kind of weave in between all these different books, of which only 5 actually got released in a proposed 7,
Ooh.
and we're getting close to book 6. But I mean, book 7, I don't know. I'm assuming the sun will have
Mhm.
burst by the time that thing is actually done, but I don't
Probably.
know.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it's kind of sad, isn't it? That
Hmm.
this guy could literally create I'd say like 4 masterworks. 5 is probably
Hmm.
like we're getting kind of in that 50-50 territory, but it's getting to that point where I think people do want to see how the books actually end. Like
Yeah, and I mean, I have to wonder if maybe R. Martin there just feels defeated. Like, you know what? The story's already done. What's the point? I'm just,
yeah,
I'm finished. I'll never work in this town again. They've ruined my
yeah,
story. I can't
it's
go
ruined.
on. I'll just sit here and cry in my millions that I got from the show.
Yeah. Well,
Oh man. Hmm.
I do think it's kind of interesting that this show did take a few years to develop because
Hmm.
the development for the show began actually roughly about 4 years before it actually came out. So we did have a lot of front end work that kind of went into
Hmm.
it. And in the beginning, it was proposed that each book would represent like one season,
Hmm.
right? So they didn't quite do that. You can kind of tell that near the end of this series, because we ended up getting 78 episodes, 8 seasons, and at the end they're kind of doing the thing you see in like old cartoons where they're telling somebody on stage to, stretch it out, like pulling
Hmm.
things as far as it can go.
Hmm. It's
Kind of felt like that a little bit.
like Galaxy Quest, and they're waiting for Tim Allen to get on stage, and he's just not
Yeah.
there yet. It's like, no, you got to stretch it out. You got to keep
Yeah.
going. He's not here.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It definitely, I think a lot of people felt that way, and we'll get into some of the reasons why. But before we get to that point, there's one call out that I want to make, which is very
Ooh.
specific. Name of Ramin Djawadi, which probably not a household name to many, but is the
He is to
composer.
me. Hmm.
He's real
Because
to me, goddammit.
he's, I do have one of his songs in a regular playlist of mine when I need to get the
Ooh.
energy going. So, hmm
Well, now you got to say which one it is, Joe. The people
oh,
are wondering.
it's the theme to Pacific Rim. Like if that doesn't
Oh,
get you,
yes.
that doesn't get you hyped. I don't know what will. It gets the blood flowing, Mark.
I was going to say, you don't need hymns or Viagra when you got Djawadi
No.
going on the playlist. Yeah. I got to
Hmm.
say, when the show began, and I had never seen any of it, and I just heard the theme, the main theme, that song is iconic for a
Oh
reason.
yeah. Hmm.
It's very simple. So simple, in fact, that a fan wrote a song, and the only
Know
lyrics
exactly
that
where it's going.
that were involved were Peter Dinklage for roughly about a minute and a half.
Oh
And
my god. Hmm.
if you don't believe me, I'll actually put the link in the show notes to this. It's
Oh
actually
yeah.
hilarious.
It's
And they actually
fantastic.
they played it in front of Peter Dinklage, and he's just sitting there going, "They probably need better lyrics." Wow. Wow. And he's in
Hmm.
disbelief. He's like, I can't believe somebody came up with
Did
this,
this.
I, and I'm listening to it now. but
Hmm.
but I will say, as far as setting the tone goes, this theme is probably one of the most epic you're going to see on
Hmm.
television. Right? I can't obviously butt it against cinema because it's not quite the same.
Not
But
quite. Hmm.
yeah, iconic. I love that damn theme, Joe. You can practically hump that theme.
Oh yeah, and it's got
Uh,
that sweet like weird little like war room like set of objects that are just constantly
yeah,
interacting and churning and moving around as the theme continues. Which I do believe the number of I guess pieces within factions change in the opening theme song as the season goes on to represent what's happening in the show.
yeah. Oh yeah. If this was a
Hmm.
radio show and we were like, what to watch for, and like, brr, 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 and there's like all the the audio effects, this would be
Hmm.
one of those things because you're absolutely right. In the beginning of the show, it introduces you to like the major players of that season, and as it goes, of course, things change. However, there's also another detail to look out for on this. All of the rotating pieces and this mandala looking thing, on the
Hmm.
top, it's actually an art piece in the Citadel that you end up seeing later in the show. It's like season 5 and 6.
Ooh.
So this physical thing actually does exist in part of the greater Game of Thrones universe. So observe, take a look. You'll see it again. Yeah. But Joe, here's
Hmm.
the question that I want to ask you, and I'll
Okay.
obviously provide my own background on this. But Joe,
Oh.
what is Game of Thrones in your own words?
In my own words, Game of Thrones is like 3 parts boobies, 2 parts dragon, and 1 part fighting. And I would say I'm gonna go like another like 3 parts backstabbing, and you have Game of Thrones. You mix all of that together, and that's the ingredients for the show. Until the last season, where they really start scaling back on the boobies.
You know, I'm not going to disagree with what you've put into what's the theoretical soup.
It's a damn
I
fine
think
assessment, Mark.
I,
If I do say so myself.
to me, it really just felt like this. For those of us that don't want to talk about Kevin Spacey anymore in House of Cards, which also, once again, forgotten thing that none of us are
Yep.
really talking about.
Hmm.
But that's kind of what it is. It's in the beginning of the show, it's much more about political theater and houses that are kind of uneasy truce type of
Hmm.
scenario, right? Like
Yeah.
it almost feels like a Cold War in a sense, because in the beginning of the show, it's a lot of people are still talking about this man
Hmm.
Robert in this little rebellion that he kind of put together to overthrow the previous monarch. And
Hmm.
got to say, there's a little bit of damage still going on from that. A little bit
A
of
little bit, yeah. No, I feel like all of the houses are like at that point in a relationship where neither people want to be in it anymore, but no one wants to be the one to actually do the breaking up because they don't want to feel like they're the bad guy. So it's just a
mm-hmm.
lot of political weaving to make someone else be the reason why they broke up and why they had to assume power.
I mean, it is an interesting thing because so Robert Baratheon is not really the main character, but obviously he's the king in the beginning of the series, and
Mm-hmm.
a lot of this political intrigue and how the families are introduced to us, because obviously there's a lot of these houses within Westeros, which is where this place the whole show takes place, and it's interesting how the political intrigue is the vessel that kind of kicks things off. But as we go, I think the medieval influences, the fantasy, almost a sci-fi feel type of thing starts to take over.
Mm-hmm.
And so it is kind of for me, it was like a slow burn, right? Like
Oh
I
yeah.
kind of knew what we're getting into here.
Mm-hmm.
My wife obviously didn't, and some other folks that, weren't familiar with the series didn't know this. But it's a show that does kind of escalate from different tonal themes. And so
Mm-hmm.
I always thought that was cool. I thought they actually did that properly. I thought the ramping of it was well executed. What do you think?
I agree. And I think part of what works really well for that is the fact that throughout the series, you've kind of got three independent stories or three independent, like, I don't want to say like looming dooms, but like three larger stories that are slowly working closer to ending at the same time or ending near each other. Where you have the fear of the White Walkers, like
Mm,
coming down because they are this race of basically frost zombies that are incredibly difficult to kill. They are slowly making their way from the other side of the wall into Westeros. Then, of course, you have the actual bid for the throne among a majority of the houses that are still there. And then you have the disgraced Targaryen family, where you have
mm.
Daenerys Targaryen is making her comeback tour happen, where she is going around the outskirts of Westeros. And actually, no, she's actually banned from Westeros and she's making her way back in and
I,
just getting political like favor and like I don't know support along the way until she would make it back and reclaim the throne.
like band to me sounds like you accidentally, well, or you went to Costco and you let somebody else buy stuff with your card, kind of thing, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
This was a little bit different because when Robert Baratheon forcefully took back the throne, he pretty much killed every Targaryen that he could get his hands on.
That
These were
he
the ones he
did.
just really couldn't, and they were
Mm-hmm.
they were ushered out of Westeros towards the. Geez, I'm drawing a blank. I just know it's not there anymore.
It's
So
it's
she got
east of
kicked out.
Westeros because we don't know what's west of Westeros.
Easteros, yes, we're in
Easteros.
Easter.
Mm-hmm.
We're in Easteros.
Which I can see why it wasn't named that because it just sounds like someone is like mispronouncing a holiday.
I was going to
So
say,
yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like the proto version of Easter, like how they would have said it thousands of years ago.
Yeah, it's like that's what the pagan version was of the holiday, and then the Christian church came like, "We'll let you have it, but you've got to change why you celebrate it, and we're going to change the name from Easteros to Easter." And they're like, "Yeah, sure,
Mhm.
whatever, that's fine.
Yeah,
We'll go for it."
it's whatever. I get my holiday. I'm happy.
Yeah,
Okay, no big deal.
yeah. Also, fully aware that that is much more how we got Christmas than Easter. I'm just throwing shit out there because it's
No,
entertaining. But yeah,
well,
back to Game of
let
Thrones.
let's take it back for a moment because you've mentioned some pretty heavy things that
Mm-hmm.
represent how the show kind of grows into. But in the beginning, we're really kind of focused on House Stark, which is in the northern part of Westeros. Very cold. You know,
Hmm.
it's winter is always coming. You know,
I mean,
winter
because
always finishes.
it's just so far north that it's gonna
Yeah,
happen. Yeah. Hmm.
yeah. But you know, it's interesting that House Stark is basically like our quote unquote like good guys, right? There's a
Hmm.
lot of people you can't trust in Westeros, but the Starks are people that you can kind of
Yeah.
trust.
Hmm.
These are people who lived very tough lives. They don't believe in posh.
Hmm.
They're covered in fur. I mean,
They're basically the Midwesterosans of the story.
yeah, there you go.
Nice, dependable
Oh my
folk.
god,
It's like if all of them were
that's
in Aquarius, they're just good people.
can you believe that if like Westeros was just full of Upers and then hey
Oh,
guy, hey, we got all kinds of stores here. You could attack us for years and we're not gonna run out of food. Okay,
all,
go
all,
ahead.
all they do is just talk to you about the weather every time they come into every time they come into the main castle. What's the book from the north? Oh gosh, it's getting cold again up there, yeah. And
Yeah.
the wind is just blowing so much that went clear through the castle, blew me right off the bed, froze to the ground. It was horrible. No, like
What's
what are the crops like? Oh yeah, those are good.
yeah?
Those are fine.
I was gonna say it takes about 2 months to get here, doesn't it? From the Red Keep. Is that about right? Does that take you that long?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep, it's always
That's
it's because
usually
we do
always what
things
it
in
is.
time.
Yeah. Oh my god. Which
Oh. Mhm.
which now that I put it in that kind of light, God, it makes me think about the Starks and Winterfell totally different because
Mhm.
now now Winterfell is basically file for country. We've established that, so that's
It basically
fantastic.
is. It's cold and kind of flat, looks dead most of the year, so it makes sense that people would just soar right over it.
Oh yeah. Dude, there's
Hmm.
there's there's nothing here. It's just
Yeah,
snow. That's all.
yeah.
But
And when it's
there,
not snow, it's road construction because let's
oh,
go
I
throw that joke in there.
was gonna say there's got to be an I-90 somewhere in Winterfell. Yeah, one lane is constantly shut
Hmm.
down. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Flex lane is open
Hmm.
today, but the Starks are represented by the Eddard. He is
Hmm.
the patriarch of the family, and Joe. This doesn't really feel like it's so much of a spoiler at this point,
No, no.
but
And
he's played by
really,
our boy Sean Bean, right?
yep. And if you're unaware of who Sean Bean is, shame on you. If you're aware of who Sean Bean is, you know he's not going to make it very far in the series.
Yeah.
That's just how Sean Bean do or did
Hmm.
because he has vowed to never die in a movie again.
I gotta say, of all the families that we get attached to throughout this
Hmm.
series, though, the Starks are definitely the ones with the most
Oh,
staying power because
hmm,
they are very wholesome. They are flawed individuals, but they do kind of come around. They
yeah.
kind of
Hmm.
realize some of the issues that are within the family.
Oh, agreed.
But
Hmm.
yeah, but I would say very early on, one of these kind of unspoken things is that Eddard and Catelyn, Lady Catelyn, his wife,
Hmm.
there's always this air of like, does it feel like there's a glass panel between them? Right? Like you can just tell that there is
Hmm.
a young gentleman by the name of Jon Snow who happens to live with them, who is an unexplained child that Eddard decides to tell his wife, "Oh, that's a bastard. I shagged some lady while I was
Yep.
off at war, and I brought him back with me."
My bad.
Whoopsies. And it really does kind
Hmm.
of create this weird dynamic because you have their natural born children, of course, with
Hmm.
which there's five of them, and
Most
they
of them
seem to
very. I don't
be
know. Actually, I say most of them ginger, but really it's just the one. I think it's just the one ginger.
one. Yeah, I guess it
Isn't it just
depends on the
Sansa?
season. Depends on
Yeah,
the season. Yeah,
Sansa's
Sansa's hair color
Sansa,
changes.
Sansa. I don't know. I think she's consistently pretty darn ginger, but like
Yeah.
Arya isn't. Bran isn't.
No, Bran just sits there for a while and then he goes,
Yeah.
"I'm Bran Stark. I
Bran.
don't move anymore."
Yeah, he's like the fifth beetle. He just kind of he's just there. Um,
he's yeah, he's uglier than Ringo. Yeah, less talent than any of them. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's unfortunate.
Yep.
Well, but yeah, it's so in the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
it's much more about the families, right? Because
Yeah.
early on, you've got the Baratheons who married into House Lannister, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the Lannisters, Joe, I know what I want to call them, but
Oof.
how would you describe House Lannister for people who've never seen this before?
Straight up sons of bitches, Mark. That's this whole house. They apparently always pay their debts, so I guess good on them for that. That
Yeah.
they have a good credit rating. But basically, if there is a way to stick something up someone's rear end, the Lannisters have found six other ways from Sunday to do it. They just kind of thrive on making everyone else be miserable.
I know.
And even like each other, like they're kind of always like, even when it's like you should get along because literally everyone else hates you, they're like, nah, I hate everyone else. I hate everyone here. They're all bad. I
They're
know why they hate
basically
us.
they're basically like the Nazis just without the
Mm-hmm.
symbols. You know,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
they're very big douchebags. And right away, like what I loved about I say hate and love very quickly close together, but
Mm-hmm.
like what I loved about the early seasons of Game of Thrones, especially season one, is that the Lannisters, they definitely leaned into the fact they're supposed to be like bright blonde haired people. And in like the first season of the show, if you watch for it, like every one of them has unnecessarily blonde hair. You
Yep.
know,
Mm-hmm.
especially Peter Dinklage. He almost looks like a boy band member with the hair coloring that he has. But to your point, Joe, yes, they are constantly getting under everybody's skin, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
in the very early seasons of this show, there's nothing redeemable about any of the Lannisters at all. Like
No.
there's just not a whole lot. They're the
Mm-hmm.
absolute worst experience or worst examples of like indulgence and pseudo royalty that doesn't actually sit on the throne.
Pretty much. And I think what is probably the worst part of this whole family is the real life consequences that it had, because I think one I would think they definitely produced the most hated character on the show. He didn't make it all of the seasons either, but little Joffrey
Oof.
pretty much immediately hated universally by everyone watching the show. So much so that the actor playing him got so much shit from people at conventions or just out in public over how much they hate him. Not his character, how much they hate him because of one, which is a testament to his acting at the time, is he does such a good job of being a villain that you just hate seeing him on screen before he does anything, that people hate him in real life because they can't separate fantasy from reality very well. So good on you, but also at the same time, I don't know if he's done anything since the show, and I don't think he
No,
wants to.
he basically retired. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to your point, a lot of people. It was interesting how this split kind of happened, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
Joffrey is such a shitty human being and kind of the whiny little brother that I think a lot of people envision when they think of younger siblings,
Mm-hmm.
just completely unchecked. Jack Gleason, who played him, actually kind of heard feedback from both sides. There were people who were like, absolutely hate you because of what you did as Joffrey. But
Mm-hmm.
then there were other people that said, I absolutely love you for your talent and ability to play Joffrey that way. And to your point, yes, he kind of backed into the smoke and just kind of disappeared
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, he hasn't really been acting again. Although Jack Gleason, if you remember, he is part of the Dark Knight trilogy, Joe.
That he is. Yeah, I forgot about that. He is in
Yeah.
there. Mm-hmm.
Little boy in Batman Begins.
Yeah, and there's one other character who I think got the same treatment, both out in the real world and at conventions, and that was his mother, Cersei Lannister. Except,
Mm.
unlike little Jack Gleason, the actress just kind of leaned into it and she's like, "Yep, fucking hate me, I don't care." She's like, "Yeah,
It,
I'm
wasn't that
old. I'm
funny?
not old. I'm like I'm British and middle aged. What are you gonna do to me?
It
Nothing."
was funny that Lena Headey or Headey, I think it's
Mm-hmm.
Headey. She
It's Edie.
she leaned into all of that about Cersei, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, before this point, I think people knew her as the Queen in 300. Like that's where a lot of people
Mm-hmm.
saw her initially, and then her coming over to this, and it's like, yeah, I don't trust anything about this woman head to toe.
Mm-mm.
And
No.
ugh, yeah,
Yep. And then
she's
she resurfaces as Mama in Dread and just does it all over again. Makes us really hate her because she's so good.
yeah. Oh
Mm-hmm.
yeah, seriously, she's a fantastic villain. I think
Mm-hmm.
it's a shame that she's maybe not doing as much anymore these days, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's had some pretty good properties
Oh yeah.
attached to her.
Mm-hmm.
But as far as building the houses of Westeros goes, so we got Stark, we got Lannister, we got Baratheon. These really make up the majority of like the early seasons of the show. Like this is where
Mm-hmm.
most of our drama is kind of woven into, and I think they're the people you're going to be the most familiar with as we go. But obviously, there's smaller houses. There's not so powerful ones that kind of
Mm-hmm.
come and go throughout the seasons.
Sub
Um,
houses, if you will. Maybe more like
yeah,
apartments.
these are the
Just
townhouses
yeah.
of Westeros. Yeah,
If
like
we have
like
to classify them.
yeah. Well, I mean, because you're going to have houses like Martell,
Mm-hmm.
Tully, the Boltons, the Greyjoys,
Oh.
uh,
Mm-hmm.
Aaron's. You know, like there's there. Oh, and the phrase. You can't forget about the
Yep.
phrase,
Can't
Joe.
forget the phrase.
No,
Yeah, but I
can't forget
mean,
about
I
the.
like House Martell just makes me so sad because of the Viper.
Yeah,
Oh.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
I know. My boy
Yeah.
does not have the ADD. He just would like it to jump.
Oh,
Yeah.
Pedro Pascal, like you had us. You had like I remember that like his last episode was so good, and then much like the overall series itself, just ended so poorly. It's like God
Ugh.
damn it, God dang it, Pedro, why you cocky
Which kind
son
of
of a bitch?
and that kind of brings us to like subtopic number one for this show, which
Mm-hmm.
is if you start to like a character, begin writing their eulogy because
Yes, don't like them
it's a
long.
seriously, this is like building a foundation on a swamp. Like
Mm-hmm.
it just collapses in on itself. We pile more plot and characters on top of it. That falls in on itself, and you just kind
Mm-hmm.
of do it all over again. We kind of keep going through this.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah. It's like when Ricky Bobby stabs a knife in his leg to prove that he can't feel anything, and then to get the first knife out, he stabs another knife in to get the first knife out.
oh
It
yeah,
complicates things and it just gets worse. It gets worse. All of the people
yeah.
you like die. Hurts. Hurts
I
a
know,
lot.
I know. There were many times we watched this where the wife leaned into me and she was going like, "Can I get attached to this person?" And I was just like, may, well, we do have the ability to rewatch, so I guess you could stay
Yes.
attached if you want.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, not
But yeah.
quite.
Mm-mm.
It
No.
happened a lot.
Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
I guess with this many seasons of a show, though, this many episodes, kind of like what we talked about with How I Met Your Mother,
Mm-hmm.
it's hard to really get into every single thing that
Oh,
happens
yeah.
across this series,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, Joe, I think what we should do, kind of like what we did with that series, is talk about what we think were the high points of this series and start
Ah,
there.
okay.
So, Joe, for you,
Mm-hmm.
what like let's just pick like an early part of the show, right? Let's just say like
Okay.
the first third of the season or the series.
Mm-hmm.
What was your high points from that part?
I mean, high points are definitely like the rise of the Starks in season one, where it was pretty phenomenal. Again, to see like a little bit of like what you would want to happen in real life, to see good people be rewarded for their hard work and their good deeds. They're out. They are clearly like well established. They're strong in their ways and in their abilities. They get some sweet dire wolf pups that get to hang out with them, one for each kid. Then they get Ned gets a promotion, gets to be the hand of the king, so he gets invited into the throne, the Iron Throne as it is, and it's fun to see good people seemingly get what they actually have coming to them before a quick and swift demise. But until we hit that point, that's a high point of the entire series is seeing the Starks, good old Ned, uh, go to the big chair. Well, he doesn't sit in it, but he gets darn close.
No, he does sit in it actually.
Oh,
There,
he's
there,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
there is a moment where he is delegating from the Iron Throne.
This is true.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but to your point, yeah, I kind of labeled this the Mr. Eddard goes to Washington part
Mm-hmm.
of the series, where
Yep.
he's tried his hardest to stay outside of the monarchy or whatever you want to call it, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what kind of keeps him staying in the North. Is that I just don't. I'm fine being the warden up here, taking care of
Mm-hmm.
business and keeping y'all safe from the walkers that y'all forgot about. But
Mm-hmm.
when he does finally leave his humble abode and gets down there, suddenly he realizes this was all a conspiracy. These things are connected. And
Yeah.
and that early mystery cost him his life, but it also helps us begin the series in a very
Mm-hmm.
big way. And it kind of begins this path of we think justice is coming and then it doesn't.
Yeah, it's again, it's the same reason you get attached to a character, you think good things going to happen to them, and then they just they die. They die horrifically, much
Mm-hmm.
like the hope of the Starks. But other than Mister Stark goes to Washington, high point for you in the series.
I would say shortly after that happens
Mm-hmm.
is Rob's rebellion, not to be confused
Uh,
with Robert's rebellion,
mm-hmm.
which is when once unfortunate Eddard loses his head. We won't tell you how, but it happens.
Does.
His oldest, Rob, decides to pick up the mantle and go, well, we're going to war, bitches,
Yep.
because you done killed Papa.
Not
And
okay. Mm-hmm.
yeah, so this kicks off this like second rebellion within the framework of the generations that are a part of this show. And I actually really thought this kind of all out war type of
Mm-hmm.
thing kind of going on. I thought it was actually really fun because you go from political intrigue to basically just like
Mm-hmm.
medieval fighting, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like it's pretty easy to get yourself wrapped around. And for me, I thought it carried really well. This all the dynamics that they were kind of building at this point in
Mm-hmm.
time, and it also really helped. I think I, I think the whole rebellion arc actually helped kind of vault all of the actors involved uh, into like stardom, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it, because pretty much everybody who was a part of this, because Richard Madden is the one who plays, Rob Stark, and he would go on to be in like the MCU, a bunch of these like Netflix movies and kind of stuff like
Mm-hmm.
that. And I really think this was the time when, even though the Stark family was like split off and shattered and all across the country of Westeros, you really got a chance to see these actors shine that represent the
Mm-hmm.
family. So I
Yeah.
really do think like that was one of the peak moments of the series was the rebellion arc for Rob.
Oh yeah, and Mark's not lying when he says that the Starks have been scattered. I mean, Sansa is being threatened to be married off to Joffrey by the throne. Arya is out doing fucking whatever. She is like fighting her way through everything. Kate is in the wind, running, trying to stay alive until she makes her way back to Robb. And Jon got exiled to the Wall, and he's literally just up there, like on the Night Watch, hanging out. So the Starks have effectively been shattered as a fam.
Yeah. Although I will
Mm-hmm.
say, part of that I think is also the dynamic of the night watch.
Mm-hmm.
Like the concept that like I would say the forgotten brothers of Westeros get sent there, whether they're
Yeah.
criminals or
Mm-hmm.
whether they took the pledge. And I think that Jon Snow willingly took the pledge
He
to go to the
did.
wall.
Yep, that
Yeah.
he did. He's a very dutiful young man, that Jon Snow. While he
Yeah.
does also effectively know nothing, as we come to find out through the series, he is a good person. But again, this whole war arc does come to an end at the Red Wedding, which, again, as a reference, that we expected to be safe among the adult staff at the school that I worked at, and we'd be on the playground and playing Foursquare with the middle school children. That whenever one person was king for one round and one round only, we referred to that person as the king of the North until someone else did the same thing, because they just don't last long up there, do they, Mark?
They definitely do not. No. I mean, to the credit of the North, they do rally pretty well. Like
They do. Mm-hmm.
when shit went down, like the bannermen all come together and like the North knows how to fight. The North remembers the fighting
But
North. But to your point, yes, the Red Wedding, oh my god, when
mm-hmm.
we're talking about things that dominated pop culture, the Red Wedding, it upset people. It shocked people. Everybody was talking about it. I mean, and once again, if you get attached to like any character over this season, good chance you're going to have to say goodbye.
Yeah.
And
And
this was
I mean,
massive.
it like you saying like people were hurt by this or shook by this. I mean, it's not enough. That is not an accurate description of what happened to people after witnessing the Red Wedding. Like it is just straight up, it gutted people. Because again,
Yeah.
like I mentioned, like you're hoping for good things with the Starks finally because they're good people, they're doing what's right, and then John ends up with his direwolf's head sewn to his body after his own was removed. He's paraded around like to make fun of the Starks and their efforts, and it is one of the hardest moments to watch where you just sit there thinking like this didn't happen. Like it's where you question if it's real life, even though you damn well know it's not real life. You're still wondering, hey, this is a dream, right? Like I'm going to wake up and the show's not going to continue like this.
The problem that I kind of ran into with it was that it felt like when you're
Mm-hmm.
watching a hard fought like NFL game and the teams were like tied going into the third quarter, and then the other team just scores like 4 touchdowns, and
Yep,
you're just helpless, and you're like, we got so close.
you did.
It,
And
it felt like we were there.
And two of those touchdowns were literally the quarterbacks like missing a snap and it just being recovered in the end zone. Like
Oh,
how did that happen twice?
oh.
Like once, unbelievable. Twice, like who's getting fired?
Yeah,
Like what's going on here?
I just
Mm-hmm.
remember how like gutted I felt, and
Mm-hmm.
like I could have gone to like a Golden Corral and ate 4 plates, and my stomach would have felt empty after I watched that.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it was so gut wrenching to see that sequence
Mm-hmm.
happen, but at the same time, it was a high point for the series. I
It
mean,
was. It was just good television because and again it gives you a reason to hate the Lannisters that much more because it turns out they're behind the Red Wedding. They don't directly do it themselves, but you find that how they actually come to part of it. So it makes us hate the antagonists even more for a reason like, oh hey, it looks like we're finally winning, but no, they have their fingers in just about everything. But
mhm.
I would be remiss to say what is probably the best part of the show, in my humble opinion, and that is the rise of one Daenerys Targaryen. Because
Mm.
I think this is one of the most promising story arcs of the overall series, is of this exiled girl who is basically treated completely as like a bargaining chip or some sort of pawn to be used to be able to gain leverage on someone. She's literally being married off so that her brother could gain. I think he was given gold for her, like that. I think that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, he gets
because
gold. Mm-hmm.
he marries her off so that they would have access to Khal Drogo's army, basically.
Yes, there you go.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah,
And
you
she, out of her own volition and doing, turns all that frown upside down, becomes the mother of not one, not two, but three dragons.
mhm.
And like that whole story of her starting at the bottom and now she's here was one of the best rides of this entire show.
It really was, and it led to this pop culture waterfall of people naming their kids Daenerys, and
And
then
Khaleesi,
unfortunately,
yeah,
yeah,
mm-hmm.
when that finale rolls around, they're all like, maybe we should have made
Fuck.
that a middle name. I don't know.
Yeah, or
Um,
maybe we should just not name our kids after fads. Like
yeah,
maybe we don't do that. We don't go with what's trendy at the time because, as it turns out, and no one, I mean, newsflash, because few people ever see this coming. Trends die relatively quick. Usually within a decade, that thing you thought was really cool won't be cool again for like another 20 years minimum.
in this case, it was like 10 minutes after it ended. People are already
Yeah, it's like,
forgetting it.
oh shit, let's rename the kid.
Yeah. I, so I agree with you on the Daenerys front because her
Mm-hmm,
character was really well done for a very long part of this series.
mm-hmm,
But the other part of this that I actually thought was a high point, and it both instances involve Winterfell.
mm-hmm,
Uh, the first one is the Battle of the Bastards, which we get introduced to the Bolton family, who are known
mm-hmm.
for flaying people, which is basically peeling their skin off while they're still alive.
Yep.
And Ramsay Bolton, there's no way to really dance around it. He's just a very bad person.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he's horrendous.
Yeah, and before, if there's any curiosity about this happening, we're going to crush this hope and dream of yours right away. If you haven't seen the show, no guest appearance by one Michael Bolton for the
No.
show because his family has a house here. But yeah, no, Ramsey is just a sick son of a bitch. And again, this is just another like what we've talked so much about how good villains can really make a property. And he, again, this is just another person who you really love to hate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's what makes the Battle of the Bastards so crazy is that you have Jon Snow played by Kit Harington, who of course is like our favorite bastard and the most popular bastard in Westeros. And of course, he still holds his allegiances to House Stark even after he goes to the Wall. And when he comes back, he has to fight Ramsay to get get back control of it because shit just kind of fell apart while he was gone. But I would say the Battle of the Bastards was one of those moments of like TV history where
Yeah.
you're fist pumping. You're just like,
Mm-hmm.
yes, like, oh, yes. And you're at the end of that episode, high fiving people you've never met.
Yeah.
And, and it was fantastic television, which is what brings me to the Battle of Winterfell, which happens a little bit later than that. Once you've talked about the White Walkers potentially being a threat to humanity, and that finally becomes realized. For me, the Battle of Winterfell was easily the most impactful TV moment I think I've ever seen in my life. I was on the edge of my seat. People were barely breathing in the room. We're all breathing shallow. We're trying to keep it all in. And it was just the most thrilling hour of television you're ever going to watch. Even now, if I watch that episode again, I know what's going to happen, but I'm still scared.
Yeah, and one of our favorite side characters is going to start by going, "Where's the big woman?"
That's right, Tormund. Yes.
Tormund is
great. Which, hey, to your point, the wildlings did come into play, relatively about midway through the series or the seasons. And the wildlings were another high point for me because there are people who have to live north of this massive wall that's built to keep the walkers out. And they're still real people. They're just kind of feral. And God, Tormund is just, he's one of the best parts of this series. Easily one of my favorite characters from the whole thing.
Yep. That was, I think his Tormund's steps to staying healthy. And it is, what was it like? I know it's, I think it's one thing, fighting's better and fucking is best. That's the best way to stay healthy in his mind. But while we had some really good highs in series, and there were just so many really good things about this show, seasons 1 through even into 8. While series 8, season 8 gets a lot of shit, there's still good stuff that happens in season 8. Just lots of bangers in the show, but not every show can be wall-to-wall bangers. You're going to get some low points in there. Mark, what's a low point on the show?
So for me, it falls with the Faceless Men. So fairly early in the series, we get introduced to a character whose name is Juggernaut. And this actor, I always forget his name, but some of you who've seen Stranger Things, for example, you probably will recognize him. He appears there. But he represents this faction known as the Faceless Men, who are basically assassins who can change their appearance and shift their faces, and they're they're almost this mystical part of the series. And the mysticism, I think, is what really didn't get a chance to take flight fully in the show.
Yeah.
It does in the book series. In the book series, the mysticism is it's a fully realized thing. They don't quite deliver that in the show. And the Faceless Men are obviously very interesting people. They've been assassins for a very long time. They do very cool things. But just as quickly as we get introduced to them, they're completely cut out of the series as if nothing ever happened. And, Arya's character ties into the Faceless Men, trains with them, gets to know their secrets and all that stuff. And she kind of turns her back on them. And instead of actually using their skills and 86ing her, nope, they're just gone.
It's done.
See ya.
Yeah. Didn't happen. Never happened.
Yeah. I would say the Faceless Men,
Mm-hmm.
easily one of my low points. I mean, they're very interesting. They're
Yeah.
fantastic. The low
Mm-hmm.
point is that they just underutilize them completely.
Oh,
What about
yeah.
you?
Um, I'm trying. Like, I was actually sitting here, kind of thinking of low points, and I actually thought of like more high points, like the Arya and the Hound buddy cop, like
Oh
story
yeah,
arcs
yeah,
that went
yeah.
on with that. Like that was fantastic. But if I've got to do one, I'm gonna go back to my girl Daenerys and her flip of the switch, in like literally the last fucking episode of the show. Um, just like, are you serious? Like, there was this build to the throughout the entire series that there is like kind of like this, like there was this madness within the Targaryens, right? That
Yeah.
like all of them will have such great qualities, but then either it's like the lust for power or something else inevitably always warps and twists them to do crazy things. And this whole time there's this build that that's not Daenerys because of what she's been through. She's overcome all of that, and we're going to have a good person at the end of it. And then it's like someone says one line in season 8, not even to Daenerys, not like something like pushes her over the edge or something. Someone says one line, I think, to Jon Snow about how, yeah, all the Targaryens just fucking lose it eventually.
Hmm.
Like 5 minutes later, Daenerys is a fucking psychopath and can't be trusted for anything. It's like, are you fucking serious? Like, why? This whole time we were building to that doesn't happen to her. That's the direction we were led to believe. That's what we were told is going to happen with her. We have yet another person who should not be warped by all the madness of Westeros, and then it turns out, nope, she's fucked. All because of one fucking quick line. It's like when you find out a goddamn car is a rolling nuclear bomb. You said it just to make one dumb thing happen because you didn't know how to end the damn movie.
Yeah.
Still mad about it. Never not going to be mad about it. Always going to be mad about it.
To your point, though, I mean, when we start to talk about like revelations of the series,
Mm-hmm.
there are several that kind of happen throughout. And this is kind of the last revelation, but it doesn't really get a whole lot of development. And
Mm-hmm.
some people have argued about this, that the final season of the show, if it hadn't been rushed as it was, this slow burn of Daenerys slowly going crazy
Mm-hmm.
could have been done and then made sense by the time it happens, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
But
Absolutely.
instead, though, she's like ironclad for 7 seasons, and then she
Mm-hmm.
completely falls apart like a foreign car at the very end.
Yep.
And and for me, a low point ties into this as well, which is Jon Snow's unrealized potential, as well as the revelations behind who his parents actually are. And once again, I know we don't like to spoil things because it's just our thing.
Mm-hmm.
This was one of those things in the series that people had theorized from the books for quite a long time. It was this like rolling mystery that everybody could get
Mm-hmm.
behind. And then when it finally gets delivered, it doesn't matter. I mean, in almost every conceivable
Mm-hmm.
way, it doesn't matter.
Yep.
And I'm not going to tell you why. You should
No.
watch it, damn it.
Mm-hmm. And you can figure out why
But
it's inconsequential. Mm-hmm.
but that's a crucial low point. It's like you're being edged, for 6.5, 7 seasons, and then you don't even
Mm-hmm.
get to finish. That's just a
Yeah.
damn shame.
One big old blue ball, and no one likes that. Ain't nobody.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to say this, Joe. We always love to talk about lasting legacies on this
Mm-hmm.
program. When it comes to Game of Thrones, for me, Game of Thrones, like we've kind of talked about in the opener here, was a pop culture juggernaut. I can't remember a time where I sat down for a TV show and
Mm-hmm.
did it with friends and were sitting there, drooling because of how engaged I was with something. And that's what this show gave me, was that I was so deeply entrenched in this, couldn't look away. I mean, we were so glued to this.
Mm-hmm.
It was quality television for a very long time.
Yeah.
And I agree with you that the people that shit on season 8, I think they just wanted something to dislike, but there
Mm-hmm.
still is a good amount of entertainment value that
Oh
happens
yeah. Mm-hmm.
in that final season. It just stumbles near the finish line. It really
Yep.
does.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, I choose to live in the great times of this series, of which there are many.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
There's so many,
Hmm.
so many damn good things to talk about with this show, that I would hope that people who haven't seen it, that were just kind of contrarians and went, I don't want to like this because you like this.
Hmm.
Seriously, give it a chance. I think you'll get sucked into it. But Joe,
Yeah.
what about you? What do you think about this lasting legacy of Game of Thrones?
I think if there's one thing that everyone is going to remember from this show, and is a damn good life lesson that we're all going to take away from it, it is where not to put your damn Starbucks cup. It does not belong at your feet on the set. It is like the scripts when you roll the camera shouldn't be there. Um, no, it's so. If you were again, you completely try to avoid this huge corner of pop culture. One of the things that people like to complain about in season 8 was, of course, like some production value things. Like someone had like the Battle of Winterfell. Like the episode was so like actually physically dark. Like it was just hard to see anything. Another thing was that um, I believe it was I think it was Sansa. Why am I not remembering the actress's name? She was Jean Grey in one of the newer X-Men things. But enjoying a cup of Starbucks, as we all do. We need our caffeine. And she puts it down at the foot of her chair. No one removes it, and they just film. No one caught it. No one saw it. And there, for all of us to see in the last episode of this monumental show, is a Starbucks cup in Westeros, just eyeing us all. The light that mermaid woman just staring right back at us. But I think if there's if there's a lasting legacy to the show, well, Mark, I know you want to live in the good of it. I think it is a lesson to anyone out there adapting anything, that if that adaptation you are doing isn't finished yet, you have to be damn sure you're going to write a finale or end to the story that is, if it does, like it can't make everyone happy, but it's got to make fucking sense. Because if you don't, it's going to do what this show did, and it's going to drop off the fucking map overnight.
Yeah.
Because again, when we look at, like, we say like it's a bad ending, a lot of people just felt complete. Like I would say, majority of people were let down by the ending of the show, to the point where like any sort of excitement about a spin-off, like obviously we have a spin-off now, but there's this idea that maybe, hey, we do get to see what's west of Westeros, and that's going to be the spin-off. And nope, that just died, and no one cared. No one was like, oh hey, oh sad, we're not going to get that. It's like, nope, we're washing our hands of this show because of how dissatisfied we were with how it ended.
We might still get it. We got House of the Dragon, which actually did
Mm-hmm.
better with ratings than the first season of Game of Thrones actually did.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't say that completely that we're going to be done with it. Really, I
Ah.
don't. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think so. I think we're going to come back to it. But if there's one last thing that I want to add about this show, do not have sex with your sister.
Oh god, that should not have to be said. No one, like, like this is like a Jerry Springer final thought. It's just common sense. You don't have to do it. No one should have to spell that out for you. It's just
I mean,
bad. It's
there are things we
very,
shouldn't
very bad.
shouldn't have to say it, but the Lannisters did not get that memo.
No,
So
but if there's one thing we do have to say, it is to thank you for listening to this episode. And for those of you who do keep coming back week after week to listen to us, we are deeply, deeply grateful for all that you do for our podcast and our other productions. The Dissection crew is irreplaceable, and we thank you for coming back and listening to us.
if there's anything you'd like to tell us about, we'd love hearing from you. So feel free to message us over at digitaldissectionpodcast@gmail.com, whether it's your thoughts on Game of Thrones or really just anything pop culture in general. We welcome your ideas for future shows. And also look us up on social media. We're doing pop culture stuff every single week. So check us on out when we're not talking on this. You can find us talking about other stuff. And until next time, keep on dissecting.